So we're going to cover something that I've wanted to cover for a while. And as you may or may not be aware, because of the last election, a lot of what were traditionally called red wall seats that had pretty much been Labour seats since time almost immemorial. In fact, there were many people who hadn't even who have never seen these seats change from red to blue ever in their lifetimes. So that is a pretty significant change. However, as we've often said, a lot of those guys got in just on very, very narrow margins. Very, very narrow. In fact, as I've often said, the Brexit Party came the closest, I think, in the UK to actually gaining the Barnsley seat, and luckily Dan Jarvis was about 2,000 votes ahead. That is quite a small margin, even though it's about 2,000 votes, and yes, that is a lot of votes. That's very worrying, very worrying. But I want to talk today not about my own MP. We're going to go across the border. We're going to go over to Rotherham today. We're going to go to, as you may or may not know, Phil from A Different Bias. I think this might be his MP. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know where he lives, but I know he's from Rotherham. So this article today comes from the Yorkshire Bylines, and we're going to cover one of these new, quote, red wall Conservative MPs. So before we do that, please do hit that like and share button, and of course down below there's a link to my Patreon page as well as a one-off donation link. So let's get in it today. So this comes from the Yorkshire Bylines, and it's actions speak louder than words for new MP Alexander Stafford. So Alexander Stafford is among the ones to watch in the 2019 cohort of the Conservative MPs. Stafford is a young father, grandson of a Polish refugee, and like many of his 2019 colleagues, the first Conservative to represent his constituency, Rother Valley. However, unlike many of his colleagues in the Northern Research Group, Stafford has a relatively typical political career. Educated at Oxford, where he was the president of the university's Conservative Association, Stafford worked in public relations before becoming a councillor in London, and a staffer and a former frontbencher Andrew Rosdale and Owen Paterson. This has borne out and is now and is how Stafford has shaped his image for the first year in the Commons. The new MP has tried to brand himself as a modern Conservative of mature and welcoming of Britain's diversity. He has sponsored early day motions on tackling violence against women and religious persecution, and has spoken in Parliament of the importance of highlighting black British culture. An interest in sorry, don't know what's with me today. But I think my brain's just in meltdown. So an interest in environmental issues has been key to Stafford's image. As the MP, he gave an interview to The Guardian in which he called for a green-led recovery, whilst being moderately critical of how Conservatives like Margaret Thatcher treated the miners after the industrial collapse. In particular, Stafford has has pushed hydrogen as a potential way to fuel the green recovery, whilst praising the Chancellor's Green Recovery Plan and opposing HS2 on environmental grounds. At the same time, Stafford clearly believes that divisive rhetoric is the best way to keep his party activists and new constituents on side, taking on a much different role when speaking about cultural issues than his friendly environmental Guardian interviews. This came to the fore in a debate on the International Men's Day when he said this. So, we must continue to put pressure on schools, universities and companies to do more for working class boys and men. Only this week I read in 2016 the SOAS did not accept any white working class boys into university. That is a disgrace. It is worth noting, however, that women in Rother Valley are in full support of empowering our local men. They see the everyday struggles of their fathers, brothers, sons, uncles, grandfathers and friends. They do not have the reductivist mindset pushed by many in the liberal metropolitan elite of the Labour Party, in which men as a whole species are blamed for gender equality. This sort of intervention is frustrating to analyse. Stafford says nothing that is downright objectable, but his arguments are still flawed and simplistic. Instead of engaging in meaningful debate, the MP instead decides to cherry-pick unrepresentative cases while presenting a strawman arguments from his opponents to make himself seem more reasonable. Stafford's conservatism has shown itself in the other areas, particularly when it comes to issues around both crime and immigration. In a debate on public order, called during the height of the Black Lives Matter protest, Stafford said this in support of Home Secretary Priti Patel. Does my right honourable friend agree that we should push for the harshest possible sentence on perpetrators of violence, not only for causing the violence, but for undermining the key message of equality and helping to spread the coronavirus? Stafford's dog whistling has become even more marked recently, particularly with this tweet. So this is a tweet from him, and this is what he had to say in response to a Daily Mail article, which was basically going after Labour lawyers. We've seen this before. And again, I want to point out how dangerous that rhetoric actually is, because if you remember, the rhetoric that Priti Patel went after going after the do-gooder lawyers caused an immigration lawyer's office, I think it was in London, to actually be attacked. So, yeah, this kind of rhetoric is really dangerous. So anyway, this is his tweet. So, this is a disgrace. These people have destroyed and ruined countless lives. Where is the care for the victims' rights? Last-minute stops of deportations once again traumatise victims and put criminals above the innocent. Stafford's tweet here is a gross misrepresentation of the facts. Many of the detainees scheduled on the flight had not, quote, destroyed countless lives, but were in fact victims of modern-day slavery. Some had only committed relatively minor drug offences, such as Tarjay Thompson, who was halfway through serving a 15-month sentence for possession of a Class A substance at the age of 17. To represent the whole group as violent criminals is irresponsible and fans the flames of cultural division which Stafford himself claims to oppose. This sort of leveraging of regressive attitudes is coming increasingly to the forefront among backbench MPs. One only has to look at the recent moves by the new Common Sense group, of whose members claimed in a letter to the Telegraph that they speak for a silent majority of voters tired of being patronised by elitist bourgeois liberals whenever issues such as immigration or law are raised. This brand of politics is dangerous, as seen from recent warnings of the spread of far-right terrorism in the country, and the inspiration for which such figures get are from politicians like Priti Patel, who was warned by the Metropolitan Police to tone down her rhetoric against immigration lawyers following attempted attacks on them. To see it being championed by establishment conservatives like Stafford is a concerning warning sign of how widespread it is becoming within the party. Although Stafford has been willing to deploy his dangerous rhetoric, he has shown very little willingness to be anything other than a compliant, loyal Tory MP, especially to the whip, and to some extent expected, but Stafford has only voted against it once his entire year in office. His career in communications has also come in handy, as he has quickly mastered the, quote, soft question, designed to provide relief to ministers under scrutiny in Parliament. Here are just some of the few examples of Stafford's soft questions in the House. So, on a debate after the government was defeated in court on universal credit, he said this: "More than 1 million people have claimed universal credit since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Giving them access to the support in just a few days, does my honourable friend agree that this has been vital for dealing with the hardship during this difficult period?" Another one was, on Jacob Rees-Mogg's controversial decision to force Parliament to sit in person during the coronavirus pandemic, he said this: "I think my right honourable friend for giving way to an intervention, something that could not be done in the virtual Parliament. I therefore thank him for allowing me to participate fully in Parliament once more." The worst of these softball questions came during a session of Prime Minister's questions when the relaxing of regulations was being debated. On the day in question, the 11th of November, over 22,000 new cases of COVID had been recorded, but Stafford's mind seemed to be elsewhere, saying this: "Christmas is a time for joy and the celebration of hope. In the spirit of Christmas and giving, will the Prime Minister assure me that the families and friends will be reunited and be able to celebrate this most important and happy holy occasion as we usually do?" Finally, Stafford has taken some oppressive stances on family issues, notably abortion and divorce. The one time that Stafford broke the whip was to vote against the demonstrations, the abortion clinics bill, which would have limited the ability of anti-choice campaigners to intimidate women going into abortion clinics. This is a continuation of Stafford's actions as a councillor, where he abstained on the similar bill designed to protect women in Ealing. Similarly, Stafford has criticised the Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act, which added a no-fault divorce into the law and helped make it easier for men and women to escape toxic and dangerous relationship. Stafford expressed concerns that the bill might, quote, undermine the sanctity of marriage vows and allow for, quote, quickie divorces. Alexander Stafford may well want to mark himself as an exciting new MP, presenting himself to the liberal media as an environmental advocate and to his party as a popular firebrand on cultural issues. But if he succeeds in Westminster, it will be more than likely not because of his staunch loyalty to the government. And that's just one of, shall we say, the new new MPs in Parliament. And yeah, it is quite worrying that this guy is deploying such dog whistly messages. That is very, very worrying and something that we need to be aware of, and I think he needs to be challenged on Twitter, definitely on this. And like I say, this video is definitely challenging him on this, and I'd like to question him on does he think that the issues and the questions brought up in this article are legitimate cause for concerns? Does he think he's been dog whistling, and does he think that he would continue to support Priti Patel's rather very aggressive rhetoric on immigration lawyers? So I very doubt he'll ever respond to this, but who knows. Yeah, so anyway, thanks for watching. Please remember to hit that like and share button, and of course please do remember to hit that yeah I don't know where my brain's gone today. Yeah. But yeah, down below there's a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link, and thank you to the people that do support that by now. And of course, by now, you know the deal. We'll see you all next time.